Mr. Speaker, I rise to offer my amendment that prohibits any funds from being used to carry out the Biden administration's NEPA Phase 1 rule. It's clear we have bipartisan consensus. Our permitting system is broken. Our permitting system is holding up projects in every district, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And NEPA deserves a lot of this blame. When NEPA was first passed in 1969, it was a 5-page bill. Over the last 50 years, it has grown out of control thanks to executive actions and activist courts. Today, NEPA is an albatross, blocking everything from highway infrastructure projects that connect communities and enable commerce to energy projects that are necessary for securing our energy independence. In 2020, the Trump administration enacted the first real NEPA reforms in a generation. It helped bring NEPA back to its original intent. Importantly, the Trump administration's reforms removed the requirement to consider, quote, cumulative impacts, end quote, that go far beyond a proposed project. This prevented opponents of important projects from abusing the NEPA process and pointing to outrageous, distant so-called cumulative impacts a project could hypothetically pose. The reforms also forced federal agencies to build consistency in permitting reviews and ensured all federal agencies follow the same standards and procedures. These reforms began to point us back in the right direction. The Biden administration's NEPA Phase 1 rule reversed the Trump-era reforms. It reinstated the cumulative impact requirements. It gave free rein back to federal agencies to put up roadblocks for projects they didn't want. The Phase 1 rule is just another part of the Biden administration's anywhere but America, any worker but American agenda. Mr. Speaker, the Biden administration's NEPA Phase 1 rule is a step in the wrong direction. It's important that we adopt my amendment and return some sanity to our broken permitting system. I urge all my colleagues to join me in supporting this amendment, and I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I want to comment that my colleagues
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, sir. I rise in opposition to this amendment, and I want to comment that my colleagues across the aisle fundamentally misunderstand or intentionally misrepresent the interests of energy consumers in the United States and the interests of energy producers. NEPA is critically important to protect all Americans, but let's run through some statistics. There are currently 2,000 gigawatts of electric generation waiting to be interconnected to the queue in this country. That is more generation than we have by almost a factor of 2. Of those 2,000 gigawatts, there's 1 gigawatt of coal, 85 gigawatts of gas, and every other power plant that is trying to be interconnected to the grid is a zero-carbon source of energy. They are not presented by NEPA. Let's talk about the fossil fuel sector. Today we use about 20 million barrels of oil a day. A decade ago, you know how much oil we used in this country? About 20 million barrels a day. Today we use 40% less coal than we did 10 years ago. You know why? Because those industries cannot compete. People, given the choice, prefer cleaner, cheaper energy. The fastest growing vehicle segment is electric vehicles. The fastest growing source in the power sector is renewable energy. Energy is getting cheaper. And what is the energy industry doing in response? They are becoming exporters. The reason why the gas industry is growing, the reason why the oil industry is growing, is because they are building terminals to export overseas. And you know what's hard about that? Is that the American people don't want you to drill in their backyard. They don't want you to drill a pipeline through their neighborhood just so that you can run it to a terminal and sell it overseas at a profit. So if you are of the opinion that the American people don't have any say in how their communities look, how their natural parks look, how their natural lands look, if you are of the opinion that the profits of energy producers vastly outweighs the interests of energy consumers, vote for this amendment. But if you put energy consumers first, this is an absolute no. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think my colleagues across the other side of the aisle don't understand this. This administration just last month removed NEPA for the Floyd Bennett Field to host migrants. And it was the Biden administration completely took NEPA off the table for their agenda because the open border. And by the way, the IRA, the IIJA, and the CHIPS Act are not going to happen without permitting reforms and NEPA changes. Come hell or high water, it's not going to happen without the changes. And I think both sides of the aisle understand that and agree with it. We have the highest standards of living in the world because of our process. This administration continues to put up roadblocks for energy transmission, distribution, generation, mining projects, nuclear projects, road construction projects, dams, forest management. Everything that the American people want to do in a reasonable fashion is held up, in part because of NEPA. This is a very good amendment, and I urge adoption.
Does the gentleman reserve? The gentleman has the only time remaining. You're recognized.
I'm prepared to close. Mr. Speaker, we can agree that our permitting process is broken. In the debt ceiling, we got a couple permitting concerns addressed that were generational, haven't been done in 40 years. We want to be able to make sure that the American worker, the American manufacturer, the American technology, our natural resources in our country can be used responsibly. Why are we putting agreements together with the Congo to mine our minerals that we have, for instance, in northern Minnesota, the biggest copper nickel find in the world? Why are we doing that? Why is this administration stopping the American worker, stopping the creativity that we have, stopping our not only energy independence, but our national security by going to our adversaries and asking them for our critical minerals or asking them for their energy? We can do better, and I yield.
It's time.